Hello and welcome to Top 10 Teaching. We are your hosts, Derrick Crabtree and Kelsey Godfrey, and we are thrilled to have you joining us today. Today's episode comes to you from a distance. Derrick and I are both recording in separate locations so that we can be protected from COVID-19, and we are going to be talking all about distance learning. Like so many districts around the state of Tennessee and around the country, our local school district is closed until the end of the month, but we're going to be implementing distance/virtual learning. Today, we're going to be talking all about how to make the most of distance learning and how to make it work for you and your students. We hope that you'll find this episode helpful, useful, and just that it'll help you out as we navigate uncharted waters in the weeks to come, and that you'll leave this episode feeling a little less overwhelmed about what distance learning might look like.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time to be in education and to just be a human in general with all of the social distancing and the hashtag stay home and everything that comes with the coronavirus and trying to flatten the curve. So we're going to address some of the issues and some suggestions that we might have in this episode. But before we begin, we'll start every episode with a bell ringer. And our bell ringer question for this one is, what song would you sing on karaoke night? So, Kelsey, what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, that's such a good one, Derrick. First of all, I cannot sing. Let's take it back to Rachel Owen's episode when she talked about phonating and being a good singer. And I just am not a very good singer at all. But one song that I just know all the lyrics to, I know it by heart. I scream it every time it comes on the radio. I listen to it while I'm running. Like, I once requested this be my finish line song at a race. I love the song Callin' Baton Rouge by Garth Brooks. I think it's so upbeat. It's so fun. Like, everybody knows it. It's just like a really good jam. So probably that one. What about you?
That would, if it's the one I'm thinking of, I feel like that would be a fairly challenging karaoke song to go with. Does it not get kind of quick?
Yeah, it's very quick, but you're also talking to the person that talks like a mile a minute. So
that's true.
Very, very fitting for me and my personal talking speed. But yeah, it does get very quick, and it's a pretty fast song anyway. Like, it's over in like 2 minutes. But yeah, it's very upbeat. It gets very quick. It gets very fast paced, but I love it.
Well, that's interesting because I have really kind of a karaoke genre, which is anything from the 90s. I'm a big 90s, early 2000s boy band song or fan. So anything with NSYNC, I feel like is great for karaoke. Any kind of theme songs like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is one that I try to bust out whenever I can. But my go-to, like, I always have to have the one karaoke song is Friends in Low Places by Garth Brooks. For a variety of reasons.
What are the odds that we both chose Garth Brooks songs?
Well, I mean, that's always been my go-to karaoke because, one, I feel like it's just easy to sing, and I can't sing well, but I love singing, and I feel like that's an easy one to kind of pull off. And two, it's one that if you do get stuck or you're just awful and maybe you forget the words, everybody there knows the words, and they're going to join in and sing the chorus and kind of help you out. So Friends in Low Places will be my go-to.
And I'm pretty sure that's the song I requested for your birthday one time.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
We've probably done that a time or two, but
good song.
So karaoke,
Garth Brooks, what a classic.
Yeah, karaoke king, Garth Brooks. All right, so the problem that we're going to be addressing on this episode is obviously the coronavirus, COVID-19, and I'd say school closings, but just pretty much life closing. I feel like everywhere's shut down. We've got restaurants that are closing the dining rooms. Anywhere that I usually go to get my hair cut, they're not accepting customers anymore. It's everything is kind of closing down. And so we're going to talk about the coronavirus and how that's affecting schools and student learning. And the answer that we're really going to try and provide everyone with is distance learning. And we're each going to give our take on distance learning, what that really means, why it's important to do, and some tips on how to do that. So, Kelsey, any thoughts before we get into the chunk of our episode on distance learning in general? If you were a student, let me ask it this way. If you were a student, how would you feel about distance learning?
Um, well, personally, I would rather just meet in person. I remember in college, there were often times where a professor would, maybe meet online once a week, or he'd be sick and do some stuff online. And I always just preferred being there in person. I enjoyed learning from my classmates. I feel like I retain information better when it's like in an in person format. So me personally, like I think I would probably struggle with distance learning, especially if I was a teenage kid and being home and having so many distractions, so having like free time, having the ability to go outside, there's just so many possibilities there. So just personally, I feel like I would struggle with it, but I think that's just my natural personality type and the need to kind of be around people and be kind of in a social setting. But that's just me. That's not everybody, but that's how I would kind of be if I was a student, either like as a teenager or now. But what about you? Do you think distance learning would be kind of your jam?
No, I mean, if I were, it would depend on what age I would be. If I were in like middle or high school, like, yeah, I'd probably be psyched just because I could stay home and knock out a couple of easy assignments and then play, video games all day. But no, when I was in college, I was kind of the same way. I actually had to do a few online courses to get some credits to graduate on time, and I really struggled with it because I missed the social interaction. Plus, I'm not great at pacing myself. And so I'd think, oh, I've got time to do this. And, the night before a bunch of assignments are due, I haven't started any of them. So I as a student, would not be, I would like, I think, the idea of getting to stay home, but I'm not sure how successful I would end up being with that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm definitely the same way, and especially like the waiting till last minute part. And speaking of online classes in college, I remember. Do you remember the discussion boards we have to post on?
Oh, yes.
Like, I feel like everybody on discussion boards are so nice. Like, yes, I agree with you. I agree with every single thing that you said. And so
It's,
there's no like
yeah,
real engagement and real conversation and real kind of back and forth there. And then in class, you can, have disagreements, or you can piggyback, or you can have some good accountable talk. But online, I just feel like it's not there, especially like in just the written format. Maybe it would be if there was like a live Zoom call or something,
right.
but in just strictly online world, no, I don't think so.
Well, and even since we've had to or been required to post on those boards, technology has changed quite a bit. So there's a lot of available options for getting some kind of social interaction. But I still feel like it's just different. And I think there's pros and cons to the distance learning. But we'll talk about some ideas and some tips in this episode to hopefully help everybody else feel a little at ease with it. So the first thing I'd like to bring up is Google for Education, and we're going to link as many of the resources that we talk about in this episode in our show notes. But Google for Education actually has a really good guide for tips for enabled distance learning through G Suite and Chrome, which the district that we're in is a Google district anyway. So this is one of the resources that I found that's been really beneficial, and it talks about challenges and then tips to face those challenges. Like, for example, one challenge would be developing educator understanding of distance learning and digital tools, and the tips that it provides would be Google for Education certified innovators and trainers are sharing their best practices and strategies for successful implementation of distance learning. And then it gives you a variety of people and resources to follow. So it's just a really good cheat sheet. It talks about a lot of interesting things as far as how to get started. And I would argue there's a lot, and I will say this, online, which I've been online a lot more than I normally have the last couple of days and weeks. But online, there's a lot of resources that are out there. And I just kind of instinctively, if it doesn't start with Google, I'll ignore it or sort of look the other way. I kind of look towards Google and how Google will address something, or I'll go to the Google toolbox first to deal with things. And then if I can't solve it with Google, I'll look elsewhere. So that's my kind of plug for the Google for Education. I would start with that tip sheet there and then just kind of start exploring. But it addresses a lot of things like distance learning without home internet access, a way to get around that, how to engage students who are in remote locations with remote instruction, easy ways to find ready-made content, which is something that, we kind of thought that Thursday or Friday before we got out for spring break that we might have an extended closure. And so that's what we had our teachers do, is just scour the textbooks, scour the internet, anything that they can find for ready-made content. If it's already there, don't try and create something. Let's just try and get everything together as quickly as possible and get it to our kids just in case. And I'm really glad that we did that, because we're on an extended closure. And, our school, we've bought ourselves a little bit of time in that our kids have resources to already last them through a certain period. So finding ready-made content out there is good. And I will say, if your school uses iReady has a lot of downloadable resources that you can print, and it will help you keep up with that. CK12 is another place. Khan Academy already has a lot of ready-made stuff, so that's a good place to look there. Google for Education also talks about developing a safe and efficient way to send Chromebooks home, which we got Chromebooks home at our school. It seemed efficient, challenging, but we got it done. We had to kind of finagle our way around some user agreements that we had signed at the beginning of the year, and sort of make that work to our advantage. But we got Chromebooks home. I know you're at the middle school. Your students already had signed, and some of your middle schoolers already take Chromebooks home. Did you have a challenge as far as getting devices home with kids?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So, just to clarify, at the elementary school level, students don't take their devices home, correct?
No.
Okay.
At our school district, at least at our school, definitely no. And I'm pretty sure as a district as a whole, K-5 students do not take their Chromebooks home.
Okay, I couldn't. I
Normally.
thought that's how it was at our elementary schools, but I couldn't remember for sure. The
Yeah.
middle school, obviously, as you know, is a little bit different. The kids already take their Chromebooks home. We have some day users. I'm not really quite sure of the exact number of day users we have in our building. I know that I personally, out of 4 classes, maybe have like 10 day users. And our librarian was really awesome on the Friday before spring break, and she called every single parent of day users and asked permission to send Chromebooks home for the break. So there were a couple parents that said no, or that just couldn't be contacted. But for the
Right.
most part, even the day users got to get their Chromebooks home with them. And so I would
Right.
say probably like 98 or 99% of our kids right now have a Chromebook with them at home, which is super, super, super helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that we went ahead and, were proactive ahead of time for those day users to be able to already have it. So that was very useful.
Well, and that's that Friday morning before spring break, we got together with our leadership team, and pretty much the first decision that we made was we need to get Chromebooks home. We're going to spend the day trying to get packets and things ready of hard copies, but we have to get Chromebooks home. What's the best way to do that? And we kind of did the same thing as far as if you had a user agreement, we were going to say that's good enough to take it home, and make phone calls and document verbal confirmation of, hey, are you okay if we send your child home with a Chromebook? And we did, and having that be kind of the first decision we made at the beginning of a very busy day really helped. And I think it helped our teachers too, just be comfortable knowing that our kids are going to have a way to access any resources that we might send them digitally. So if you're in a school district that hasn't figured out a way to get devices or Chromebooks home, again, I'm going to share this Google for Education tips sheet. There's some advice on there as far as how to do that. So some other things, and I really honestly think this next thing that we're going to talk about is probably, in my opinion, the most important thing that we can be doing during an extended school closure is communicating with families. And that's kind of been one thing that has fallen at my feet and that I feel responsible for handling, our app and our social media. But I think it's huge during this time, just letting families know what's going on, letting families know where the school is, as far as uh, work that we're sending out, work that we're not sending out, anything as far as that. But the communicating with families and just keeping them in the loop and letting them know what's going on is huge. How are you guys doing that at the middle school?
So at the middle school, we have an app. I know you all do too, but every middle school here in the county, well, I think every middle school has an app. Is that true? I
Your
know
school
Carpenter's
does.
does.
Carpenter's Middle School does. I don't know about Eagleton or Union Grove. Both
Okay.
high schools do.
Okay. Um, awesome. Yeah, I think Union Grove does too. But anyway, our school has an app, and that's super helpful for we can send announcements home to parents through that way. Teachers can set up their individual app page and like push notifications through to their individual classes, which I've done also. But the biggest thing is just the school being able to send home mass information about building hours, about meals for students, and pretty much just keeping people updated about everything that they need to be updated about, so they're getting their information from us, which obviously is a reliable source, versus
Right.
from social media or
Right.
elsewhere. So the app is very, very, very effective. We also have a school Instagram account that we update pretty regularly, so
Mm-hmm.
that's helpful. I have a lot of students kind of emailing me and kind of asking questions about different stuff, and right now I'm like, dude, just enjoy your break. Because I had kids like emailing me that
Right.
Tuesday. Like, do I have to do already over spring? I'm like, enjoy your break. Like, message me on Monday. I'm
Yeah.
super glad that you're wanting to be an overachiever, but just enjoy this time. Like, you're going to have plenty of time to do all this work. So that's been fun too. But I would say our main way of communicating with families is for sure through the app, as far as like getting information out in a mass way.
Yeah. Now that was a big point of emphasis for us and our families was we were going into our spring break and we were sending stuff home and Chromebooks and work and things to prepare for an extended school closure, but we emphasized that you still get a spring break. Like, don't worry about getting as much of this done as early as possible. Enjoy your time, enjoy your spring break. I'm not sure how much of a spring break or where anybody could have gone anyway, but don't kind of like you said, don't start stuff until Monday or Tuesday. And at the time we're recording this, those days are coming up, and so we'll have a lot of I'm sure communication going on to clarify things. But no, kind of like you said, we're sort of in the same boat as far as communicating from the school standpoint. We're doing that through the app. And really, if you have a school app or one hub to sort of communicate through, I'm gonna explain my thought behind this, and then tell me what you think. And if you were a parent or somebody receiving this, what would you like? How would you do it differently? In my mind, I wouldn't want to send out, if I were a parent, which I am, I wouldn't want to get bombarded by information and like here's a push alert, here's another notification, here's another one, and then another one, kind of like DJ Khaled with like news updates or whatever. But what I've done or what we've done on our app is we've hosted one Google Doc, we've pinned it at the top of the app, and we've said this is where we're going to be putting information. And unless the information is incredibly urgent, we've directed our families and our parents to go back to this Google Doc regularly and check and see. And so anytime I'll update the Google Doc, I'll put a timestamp with it, and it'll show what's the most recent news and what's maybe a little bit older. But instead of pushing out a ton of stuff all at once, we've just kind of put the one hub, one thing up there and said check in regularly, and this is where we're going to kind of put community resources, if there's where to pick up food, if there's like we've got some free food trucks on there. The Blount County Public Library has some resources, and we're just kind of hosting everything on that one Google Doc, as opposed to sending 20 push notifications out a day.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart idea. And not just, from a parent standpoint, I'll speak as a teacher. This past week was our spring break, and I had to really kind of be conscientious of like how often I was checking my email. Of course, if I had an email from my principal or from Mr. Britt or, from anybody at central office, like I would check it and stuff and read it,
Right.
make myself aware and informed. But in general, I tried to kind of stay away from my email because it was our break, and just getting like email after email after email kind of got old after a while.
Yeah.
Going forward, obviously it'll be different, but even with distance learning, I mean, if we're at home all day long, it's going to be tempting to like work all day long, like being answering emails late at night, or just doing all kinds of stuff throughout the day instead of having kind of set hours.
Right.
But in response to what you just said about the app, I think that's very helpful, because I know that I tend to go into like ignore mode once something keeps on coming through again and again and again. And
Right.
I appreciate like updates, but not being completely bombarded. And I think it's always helpful to have something in one place, especially if they can refer back to it. I know not over the weekend, I think it was Thursday, I made a video and posted it to all my Google Classrooms and said like, hey, hope everybody's doing great. On Monday, I'm going to be coming on and doing another video, and you can join if you want to. And that's when I plan to like just give all this information. And I'm planning to do it in like spoken form. And I'll probably like type something up too in case people want to read it. But that way, if people have any questions, they can just always refer back to that instead of just like constantly posting announcements and constantly posting materials and things
Right.
like that. So yeah, I definitely like that idea.
Well, and that's something we were talking about before we started recording too. Is a big part of this is keeping it simple. It'll be real easy to get carried away. And if you get on Twitter or like I'm in a Voxer group that's is incredible and is flooding everybody with ideas, and we're doing this and we're doing that. I think it's easy to get carried away and try and do too much and push too much information out all at once.
Yeah.
It's important to keep it, especially when you're communicating with your families, keep it simple, because they're having challenges too. They're having to deal with things that they're not used to dealing with, and they're now kind of primarily responsible for their child's education to a certain degree, or more responsible maybe than they have been before.
Right.
But it's still important to keep it simple, not flood parents with too much information or too many resources. Just that's why we kind of went with the Google Doc, is just put it up there and let them empower them to come to it if they need it. And that's kind of the mindset we're taking there, is like, it's there if you need it, but we're not gonna attack you with links and videos and everything.
And well, even as an adult, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like we've been subject to that. Like, I see people on Facebook like all day long posting all this free stuff, like, oh, you can watch the animals at the zoo, and you can watch a Broadway show, and you can watch this, and you can do this, and there's like, you can take these online courses, and there's just so much stuff. And I mean, it's wonderful stuff. Like, I think it's great that you can check out all these books from the New York Public Library. I think it's great that you can watch Broadway musicals. I think it's great that you can do kind of like an online webinar of sorts. But it's just so much information at one time, and like you don't even know where to start. And then you're kind of left being like, well, I'm not going to do any of this. And I think that too, like now that kind of testing is probably not going to be a thing, that a lot of teachers may want to kind of venture off in this direction of like, well, we can do like super, super fun things now and stuff that like don't really matter because we're not going to be tested on it and stuff. But then when you do too much of that, like it just becomes overwhelming, because I truly believe that, too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing. And that's not just true in education. That's true in every part of life. But it just constantly, I mean, it just feels like just a barrage of information, and you're left like not wanting to do anything. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. And that's why I think it's important, especially early on. A lot of schools are entering their extended closures. And I think it's really important to keep in mind that you don't want to burn out, yourself or the parents or the students at the beginning, because this may be an extended thing that we're having to deal with. And even if they cancel testing, I something that I've been kind of struggling, with myself is I feel like if we have the ability to do something with our kids, even if it is little bite-sized pieces of learning, we're still obligated to be there for our kids. But, at the same time, if you're a teacher in the classroom, you're not going to throw 5 textbooks at a kid all at once and say, do all of these things in the next 30 minutes. You're going to pace them through stuff, and you're going to give them things that they can handle. Not too much. And I do agree with that. Now, you mentioned something earlier. You're communicating with your students through, I think it was Google Classroom. We talked about how we're communicating school to families. How are your teachers at your school, if they've been instructed to do so or if they're doing on their own, how are teachers communicating directly to students?
Well, we haven't really received any instructions yet. Our principal's we're gonna have a virtual faculty meeting tomorrow, and
Yes.
get more information about that. But I can just speak for myself personally. I can't really speak for my coworkers, but I posted an announcement to Google Classroom the other day that just basically said, if you have any questions during this time, or you have any concerns, or you just want to talk, or like whatever, then just email me. And I've gotten several
Yeah.
emails that way. And of course, the kids kind of comment back and forth on those announcement posts, and it's kind of fun to see. And then, like I said, I made a video that I posted and just said, like, hey, I miss all of you. I can't wait to see your faces. Here's a couple things. Like, I talked about the free meals that we're having. And then I just said, like, hey, I'm going to go live on Monday to talk to everybody and kind of just give you a rundown about expectations and what's going to be required and what this week is going to look like. And I plan to do that through Google Meet. I think I talked to you about this. I wanted to really do Zoom because I love Zoom, but Zoom is blocked on the kids' Chromebooks, and so we're going to try Google Meet. And I honestly plan to do like a check-in probably twice a week, like not counting tomorrow. And I'll probably do it like with each grade level. Since I teach 2 grades, I'll probably maybe set from 9 to 10, I'll do a Google Meet with 6th graders, and then maybe from 10 to 11, do a Google Meet with 7th graders, and just check in, see their faces, just talk to them. Maybe I'm just projecting, but I wouldn't say lonely, but I'm craving interaction with people because I live alone and I haven't really been out because I've been, hashtag stay home.
Right.
And so I can't imagine how my kids are feeling. Maybe they don't want to talk to anybody. Maybe the last thing they want to do is see their teacher. I don't know, but I want to at least offer that and keep them up to date with questions. And I think it's just always easier to just ask a question face to face than it is to like email something out.
Right.
So that's kind of how I'm communicating. Maybe if we do a closure longer than just through April 1st, I'll get more creative and find another way to do that. But as of right now, I'm just using Google Classroom and email and making it like a video post, and hopefully going to move into using Google Meet in the coming weeks just to be able to see my kids' faces. And I know we've talked about this on past podcasts. You're probably in a different place now that you teach elementary school and you're a little bit more of a softie. But I mean, like when we have breaks, like just normal breaks, Christmas break, spring break, fall break, like I miss my kids really bad. I miss talking to them. I miss hearing their stories. I miss laughing with them. And so this was just a normal break like we've had, but going into this extended closure, like I really want to be able to see my kids' faces, to hear their voices, to talk to them, and to hear from them. So I'm excited about that. And like I said, that's totally on their end. If they want to join, they can. If not, that's not going to hurt my feelings. But if they're anything like me, then they need someone to talk to because I'm like about to start talking to the wall.
Well, I think that's important, and like we said, earlier, we don't want to flood kids with too much, but I think checking in with kids once or twice a week is huge. I think it's important, and I think it's a big deal to kids, and the content is not, I think, as important as where you're coming from. The place that it's coming from is just wanting to have that interaction with kids, and just even if it's a face on a screen, just be there for a kid and say like, hey, I care about you enough. I'm checking in. What do you need? How can I help you? And I will say our teachers are they're great with that. Now we don't have as many at K5. We don't have as many set up on Google Classroom. We have a few teachers, but the big way that they communicate with their students and parents is through Seesaw. There's an app called Seesaw, and it's essentially it's almost like the elementary version of Google Classroom, but the communication is is instant. It's varied, and it's a good way. I don't have any doubts that about our teachers' ability to connect with kids and to check in, especially since it's so easy through that one way. But I think doing that is huge. And not just putting like when we talk about resources or assignments or anything, not just putting stuff out there, but having a face with it. Especially with these younger kids, these teachers are huge. They're a big part of their lives, and they are. Not that middle school teachers aren't important to middle school students, but like these kindergartners and first graders, and all of our students really need to see our teachers, and they need to see that we care about them and that we're checking in on them, because this is imagine if you were 5 or 6 and you're brand new to the educational journey, and this happens. You're missing what could be up to a quarter of your school year, and
Yeah.
it's a weird, unprecedented experience. And I think just being a face and checking in and being friendly, even if it's just say, hey, how are you? Do you need anything? Not necessarily to check in about an assignment or whatever, but just be a face and be friendly and
Yeah.
see how these kids are doing.
And I'll tell you something, like, this is like, it's probably going to sound like a brag, but it's not meant to brag. It was just funny that this kid said this. But I, in my video, had posted about the free meals that this church in Maryville was offering during this time. And I had said, like, hey, on Monday, if anybody needs a meal brought to their house because, like, they can't leave or their parents are at work or whatever, just send me an email and I will bring a meal to your house. And this one little girl's like, I'm not really in need. Like, I have food, but if you want to bring me a meal to my house, like, you can, because I can see you. And I was like, that is the sweetest thing ever. Like, yes, I would love to bring a meal to your house just so you can see me. No hugs. But I thought that was just really sweet,
Right.
because she was like, I'm probably going to be home alone. My parents are at work. And she's like, I really don't need food, but if you can just bring me one so I can see you. I was like, that's so precious. I love it.
Yeah.
And something else, this is something I've seen a lot from my elementary teacher friends, like, around the country, especially through Scholastic, because I have, like, a strong affiliation with Scholastic. But a lot of authors have kind of removed their copyright laws as far as, like, read alouds go. And I've seen so many teachers, like, sitting down each day and reading, like, a picture book to the screen. Yeah. And I've seen it done both, like, pre-recorded, like I've seen it on YouTube, and I've seen it done live, and you can see, like, parents are, like, commenting and stuff in real time with the teacher. And I think that's so fun. It's a little bit different in middle school, but I used to do, when I had time, First Chapter Friday, where I would read, like, the first chapter from a book every Friday and hopefully get the kids interested in that book enough to check it out. And one regret I do have about this extended closure is that I didn't think ahead enough to, like, know that we were going to close down, because I would have probably encouraged every kid to go and check out, like, 2 or 3 books from either my classroom library or from our school library. So they would have books to read over the break. Because if you get bored, I mean, some kids will say, like, oh, I don't like to read, but, like, if you get bored enough, like, you'll read. Especially if there's, like, nothing else to do or no internet and you can't go anywhere. So I may try to do that, like, maybe one day a week. Like, maybe start tomorrow. I don't know. This is still just kind of swirling around in my head. But reading one chapter from a book, like, each day, and then, like, by the end of the closure, like, we'll have read an entire book together. So I thought about doing that. It's a little bit different than elementary, because in elementary you can read, like, one book in one sitting. But I have several really good books for middle schoolers here at my house. So I thought about doing that, just recording myself reading one chapter a day until the book is finished. Maybe my students will like that. Maybe they'll hate it. I don't know. But I'm definitely going to throw the idea out to them tomorrow when I talk to them, because they really did love when I would do First Chapter Friday.
Well, and I saw, I think it was today or yesterday, J.K. Rowling has lifted her copyright, whatever. So you can read Harry Potter, which, I mean, it's just stuff like, it's a weird thing, and it's not all, with the coronavirus, it's not all positive, but it is nice to see people being, coming together and being understanding, like, big time authors who really have no financial reason to do this or to do these things. They're chipping in and they're doing what they can to help kids and help teachers help kids, and it's just nice to see. And we live in a great community anyway, but seeing people, churches getting food drives together, the local food trucks are getting together to serve the community, and it's just that is cool to see a lot of people come together and try and just provide whatever they can to be helpful. But yeah, I think that's good. And the reading, and I'm a big fan of the posting the YouTube videos or any of that grab and go content where you put it there and the kids can go get it or the families can go see it. And that's I've been a real big fan, and a lot of the stuff that we've put out as the school, that's what we've tried to do. Kind of like I said with the Google Doc, we've put out a few videos, but we're putting them like on YouTube or in a place where we're not oversaturating people. It's like go and grab it. But no, I think that's great. And kind of to bounce off of that, is your school or are you planning on doing anything specifically to not necessarily communicate with your students or your families, but to just stay connected? For example, we this week we're having a it's almost like a spirit week, but we're calling it like a social media daily connections activity week, where tomorrow I think it's, if you can post a picture of, it's like pajama day. So post a picture of you learning or reading or doing something in your pajamas with your family and use like our school's hashtag. And that's just one way that it's just one small bite-sized chunk way to stay connected with not just the school or your teacher, but other students and families can see what each other are doing.
Yeah. Again, I can't totally speak for my own school yet because we haven't got that information yet. So our admin may have something similar planned. I'm not totally sure. As for me personally, I thought about doing like a daily flip grid thing. Maybe something as simple as like, hey, what did you eat for breakfast today? Or hey, share something that you're doing today. You know what I'm saying? Just like have kids post just a video of themselves, even if it's like a 5 or 10-second video, just answering kind of like a daily question. I have a journal. I forgot what it's called. I wish I had it by my bedside here, but it's like I think it's called a question a day, and like every single day it asks you a question. So it's not any kind of like elaborate prompt or anything. Like you can literally write one sentence and be done with it. And the way it's set up, it's like a 5-year thing. So you can look back in like 5 years and see what you answered like that day, because obviously your answers are probably going to change from year to year. So I thought about doing that just like with a flip grid. Again, I'm a big fan of like face-to-face interaction, even if it's not live or in real time. I would just love to see, Derrick, you or like pop up on the screen and be like, hey, Miss Godfrey, like this is what I ate for breakfast today. What about you? And just like having that. And it may be something like, hey, post like a written thing, like, hey, post below, what your, I don't know, just whatever, just random, what I'm saying? Like just random questions. And I've kind of seen some companies on social media doing that, not academic related, but just like random stuff. So I think that's kind of cool, a cool way to pass the time, a cool way to connect in like kind of a non-academic way, and still like build relationships. And, like I'm excited to do this distance learning thing. I'm excited to kind of try it out because unless you're like a virtual teacher, education is one of those careers that like you can't work remotely. There's tons of careers where people can work from home and, do their job at home and do conference calls and stuff. Teaching is not really one of those things unless you just teach online for your job. But I just think about, like I have gotten to know these kids so well, but I feel like so much of my relationships each year are built in that final 9 weeks because your content's pretty much already been taught, at that point, like you're reviewing and you're kind of in the home stretch and you're stressed about testing, and then you're not stressed about testing because it's over and you can kind of breathe a little bit. And I just feel like so many of my relationships just really just kind of get the strongest in these final 9 weeks. And I just kind of feel like that's being taken away from us. So I'm really looking forward to ways to connect like that, like socially, via technology, with my kids because, I'm still getting to know them. They're still getting to know me. And I just hope this is a good time to just really get to know them in a non-invasive way.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, and I think the Flipgrid idea is it's a really good idea because again, it's not, and I'm all about the live stuff is great, and like our teachers and our principals are, we're all doing the virtual meetings and everything through Google Meet, which, I like, but when you're talking about students and families, they are not on the same schedule. Like parents might have to work, kids might be not available all the time during the day too because of that. And so I think having a kid tied down to or constrained to a time of day is challenging. But that's what I like about Flipgrid and the grab and go kind of stuff is a kid can go to that grid on their own, and whenever they have the time, and respond to a prompt, or respond to another student's response. And I think that's a good way to stay connected. And even I'm going to throw this out there too. While you were saying that, I thought of something that I had on my phone a long time ago, but I think I got rid of it. But it's an app. It's called Prompts for Writing, and you literally like open it up, and there's a blank page and a plus sign. You hit the plus sign, and it gives you like an idea, like how to start a writing prompt. Like I just hit one and it says in the beginning, and then you have to fill in the rest of it. Or you hit another one and it'll say, I feel the furthest from this, and you have to fill in, or if I imagine tomorrow, and then you kind of like fill in the blank after that. So just stuff like that might be a good way to connect with kids. That's not necessarily instructional, but it's it's those little check-ins that kind of mean a lot.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the any kind of writing we do in language arts in middle school is just aggressive and it's just super academic, and there's nothing wrong with that, but we don't really have any kind of creative time to just kind of write what you want to write, or write about your feelings, write about your personal stuff. So that'd be like a really good way to get students writing without it being like super structured or super academic. So I really like that a lot.
Yeah. Let's see what else. Another way that we're trying to stay connected is, and I got this idea from that Voxer group that I was in, but also I really like it because again, I think my fear with this distance learning is overwhelming and flooding and burning out too early. But I want to provide families opportunities to come together and still be a part of something that's in the school. And that's a thing that I've learned being at the elementary school for the time that I have, is it's also really a really important physical place to have families come in and do something together, whether it's like hosting a movie night, or we had a big activity called a cougar crawl, or a dance, or whatever it is. I still want to kind of have opportunities for families and students to be a part of something. So this week, and by the time this recording comes out, it'll probably be past tense, but we may do it more than once if it's successful. We're actually having a virtual family game night that I actually made my own biological family test out last night, and it went pretty well. Worked out some kinks, but what we're doing is we're hosting a Disney trivia night through the Kahoot app. And what we're doing is we have a pretty strong following on our Facebook page. I'll actually be hosting the questions through a Facebook live stream. And so we'll have parents come in, log in their game code, see the questions, and then through their phones or some other device, they'll be able to actually participate and answer the questions. So that's something that we're doing that I'm excited about. And it's just kind of a fun way to still, again, just be a part of the community and the school without really worrying too much about assignments or instruction or anything like that. But I think just stuff like that, and I see schools doing all kinds of things. I just think that's a fun way to stay connected and be a part of an extended, family or community. Cause it's weird, being, like you said, being isolated and staying home is it's a weird feeling. And, I think the more we can incorporate activities together and host people and, I don't want to use the word fellowship necessarily, but just enjoy each other's company in any way that we can. I think we ought to try that.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we're doing, and we're looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Okay, can I just say that as you're describing this, Derek, it so reminds me. Do you remember that app called, like, I think it was HQ Trivia? Was it
Yes.
HQ? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so for those listening that's never heard of HQ, it was HQ Trivia, right?
I think it
I think.
is. I don't
Okay.
know if it
It
still
was
is
some
or
kind
not.
of acronym. But anyway, for
Yeah.
those listening, it was this app, and then like twice a day, this guy would come on, this host, and there'd be 12 questions, and it was just really quick trivia. And if you made it to the end, like, you actually won money. And there was like 12 questions, and it would get harder as it went on. And anyway, it was just super fun. And I remember one of the times it always come on and was like at 3 p.m. or so.
Yeah.
And Derek and I had a plan at that time. So him and I would go across the hall to our coworkers' room, and we would play that every day. And it was such a fun way to, like, just have community and, like you said, fellowship with each
Yeah.
other. So the fact that you're doing that just reminds me of that game and how that guy would come on and, like,
No,
ask the questions, and people would kind of like respond in real time. And I just love that so much.
I mean, when I saw, like, I got the idea from a group that I'm in, and when I saw how they did it, that's the first thing I thought of was, like, I could be Scott, whatever his name is, from HQ Trivia, which I'm assuming is no longer around because I don't see it on the App Store. But I was like locked in my bedroom, hosting the questions and reading and giving like little quirky remarks and trivia facts about this Disney movie, and that I felt like the guy from HQ Trivia,
That
and
is so
I'm
great.
hoping that's kind of what this will end up being. And if it's successful and people have a good time with it, we'll do it, once or twice a week, and just it'll be a fun way to kind of have everybody join in and do something fun together.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You should dress up in some kind of costume, like the Mr. Monopoly Man or Dr. Seuss, or some kind of fun
Well,
thing.
I thought about digging I got some Mickey ears from when we went to Disney, but I can't find them, and I think they're packed away in a box somewhere. Plus, I think when I start a live stream on Facebook, I have to share my screen so they can actually see the questions. So I don't think I'll be on camera necessarily.
I see. Okay.
Which I'll be honest, I'm fine with, because I'm finding, and this is probably not a great thing to admit on the record for a podcast that will be stored for however many years to come. I don't quite groom myself as well as I would normally. So I bathe and everything. I just I don't. I've been a little lenient on the hair product, and
You got some facial hair going on.
I did, and it was getting pretty bad. But and all of my barbers are like closed for business, so
Yeah.
I can't go get it. I told Brittany, I'm like, we may have to get on YouTube and you try to fix my hair or something. But
You'll be like those. One of my favorite things about this whole COVID-19 situation is all the memes I've been seeing on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
And there was one I saw about like people giving themselves haircuts and stuff. Anyway, it was just really funny. Please do not try to cut your own hair. Like, let Brittany take care of that.
I'm gonna. Back when I used to buzz my hair, that was her job. But if I'm gonna try and get any kind of style,
buzz your hair either.
I did try that once, and I got pretty good, except for there was a spot on the back that I just couldn't see and couldn't get even. So, but anyway, so that's just something that we're thinking about. And before we're running up on pushing 50 minutes on what's supposed to be a 30-minute episode here, but before we get off, I've got some tools that I'm gonna offer and give like my 5-second review of a couple of things here. But before we get to that, I'm gonna fly through that pretty quickly. Is there anything you want to say about the distance learning or the coronavirus?
I really think that we've pretty much addressed everything. I would just reiterate that this is not the time to reinvent the wheel. Maybe the time to be a little bit creative as far as trying stuff maybe you don't have time to try normally, but definitely don't reinvent the wheel. The more complicated you make it for yourself, the more complicated it's going to be for your kids. And this is just a time where everybody's kind of feeling a sense of unease and maybe in some situations some panic. So definitely we don't want to add to anybody's feeling of being overwhelmed or feeling stressed out in any way. So I would
Right.
definitely just say that. And also, I just want to say, if you listened to the last episode at the beginning, we talked about the coronavirus and how
Yeah.
I would go on a vacation. Like, I don't care. Like, yes, I'll go on a cruise, no big deal. And I want to retract that statement because obviously a lot more has developed, a lot more information has came out since then. I made that comment kind of unknowing what would happen and how serious this would get. So I would definitely retract that statement and say that I would never go on a cruise during this time. I would never go on a vacation. I'm reluctant even just to leave my house right now. Especially I have a dad. My dad's in his 60s and he has some
Yeah.
lung problems. And my dad, if everybody knows my dad in real life, he's like the calm one in any situation. He's very calm and level headed, and oftentimes I get mad at him because he's like not giving a reaction. I'm like, Dad, why is this not upsetting you right now? Because he's like the exact opposite of me. But he is very worried about the coronavirus. He's very worried about getting it. He has I don't know, he's just had some fear about it, and that's kind of worried me for him. So I'm definitely taking it a lot more serious now. I know a lot of people are doing the same because we didn't really know what was going on before. But I just want to
Yeah.
retract my statement from the last
Yeah.
episode because I remember talking to you earlier. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely shouldn't have said that I would go on a cruise during all this because,
Well, now
especially,
in your defense, we were recording that at a different time. There's been a couple of presidential addresses since then. There's been a couple of CDC updates, and a lot of things have changed. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend doing that. Hashtag stay home, and um, yeah, so that it's a different time, and I think that's just one of those things that's shown how quickly this has really changed. And I was talking to a coworker before we got out. I said, like, this is going to be our generation's Great Depression, and not in terms of like how devastating necessarily it's going to be, but my great grandparents grew up in the Depression, and every story that they had linked back to, well, during the Depression, or something about that. That was their one milestone thing. Well, granted, they lived through a lot of things, the Depression, the World Wars, all of that. But this is going to be, I feel like, our generation's kind of milestone, event. Like it'll be, we'll be 20 years from now saying, hey, you remember in the coronavirus when, this. And also I think it's not going to be one of those things that we look back and remember. Like our generation's also going to have 9/11. And that was a big deal, and it changed a lot of history. But I think this is going to be one of those events that it's going to change people's daily routines and daily lives. Like, think about, had you ever? I mean, I've grown up 30 years and I wash my hands thoroughly, but I've never known more about washing hands than I do now.
no, I've seen a lot
And
of tutorials on Facebook floating
yeah,
around proper hand washing.
and like coughing into the, and like I feel like this is just one of those things, like it's people are going to remember, and it's going to change how we do stuff on a day-to-day basis moving forward. And again, I'm not saying like this is going to be like it is serious, and I'm not saying it's going to be as devastating as a world war or a Great Depression. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I know this is one of those things I'm going to remember forever, and it's going to change how I am moving forward. So there's
No,
that.
definitely. And I was talking on FaceTime earlier with some girls, and some of them are teachers, but some of them aren't. And one of them said, I've been trying to convince my company for a long time that I could do my job remotely, that I could just work from home with an office. And this is proving to them that I can. So
Yeah.
I am just curious. I know this won't really affect education necessarily, but just in other jobs, how if the workforce is going to move to a more like virtual world or more like stay at home and remote work
I
situation, because like it's proved, like obviously people are proving that it can be done and it can be done efficiently and effectively. So I just wonder kind of what the landscape of the future of just the workforce in general looks like, because it's been really interesting to see how all this has happened.
It's going to change a lot, but I think it will. I think it'll change education too. I think teachers are going to come out of this better. I'll get on a soapbox here for just a few seconds. I think a lot of teachers that have been shuffling their feet as far as getting on board with technology and all of the resources that they're now having to use during this distance learning, it's forcing them into a world they weren't comfortable getting into, which I'm not great about forcing people in a direction, but teachers are meeting expectations and exceeding them as far as being able to do this distance learning stuff. And I think they're going to come out of it on the other side better teachers, knowing more with a bigger toolbox and more skills. And it's going to make them better. Like, I don't, if we get on the other side of this, I don't think anybody's going to come out of this worse or a worse teacher, because
No,
you'll
I
either come out with skills, a new skill set, new tools, and a new respect for seeing kids and people face to face. Wes Kieschnick, who I'm a big, if you've listened to this, I'm a big fan of. He's come to our district, several times. He wrote a book called Bold School. He said, I saw this the other day. He said, schools we walked out of won't be the same schools we walk back into when this is all over. Educators are developing new skills as we speak. Every day they get better. Our schools won't just be different, but they'll be better. And I agree with that. And
Yeah,
I thought that
totally.
was a quote that was fitting, and it's going to be challenging, but I think we're going to come out of this, better. And it's definitely, I think it's made a lot of people outside of the profession of education think about what educators do, and it's revealed a lot of things. I follow this account on Instagram, and I'm trying to look up the quote. Here it is. A teacher named Nicholas Ferroni said, "This pandemic has already revealed 4 really important things. 1, schools are so much more than just schools. 2, many people now realize how tough it is to be a teacher. 3, many also realize that teachers are grossly underpaid. And 4, and finally, teachers are irreplaceable and essential to learning." So I think teachers are going to come out of this better, and I think the profession of educators as a whole is going to come out of this with a whole new respect.
Yeah, and I think it's honestly too, from like an emotional standpoint of teachers, has made people appreciate their job more. Because you have teachers who are like super super excited to be out or whatever, or that are kind of like in the day to day they're like, oh my gosh, like can I do this for X amount of more years, or how many more days to retirement, or oh I just wish I could get a break, because
Yeah.
those teachers do exist. That's just the world we live in.
Right.
But then they're finding themselves like, man, I would, I really want to be back in the classroom. I want to be back in a routine. I want to be back with my kids. And so it's really kind of helping those teachers who may be a little bit burnt out kind of rekindle their love for education a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
At least that's just what I'm seeing with people that I know personally and that I've seen on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's kind of helping the burnout process and just really making teachers appreciate their job and their kids and their routine, and just, I don't know. It's just kind of a powerful and beautiful thing to witness, just how everybody's kind of reacting to all this.
Yeah. I mean, I know, I don't know what day that will be, but the day that we open schools back up and we get back in, it's going to be special, and I'm looking forward to it. So, having said that, before we leave, I'm gonna throw out some tools to consider using and some links. I'm not gonna get into the technicalities of how to use these things, but I'm gonna throw some tools out here. These are premium tools that are being offered for free or at a discount from some pretty big companies. And if you're in education, you probably have heard of several of these before, but whether it's a premium is being dropped down to free, or some premium features are being opened up, these are tools that are available to use. And I'm going to name a tool and just kind of give like a 5 to 10 second review or summary or tip on what to do here. We kind of mentioned this earlier. Google Hangouts Meet is a good way to hold video conferences. I've used this with several teachers. I know teachers can use this to meet with students. A cool thing about this too is when you do a Google Hangouts or a Google Meet, you can record the meeting as well. So if not everybody's able to join the the video conference at the time that you've set it, you can record it and send it out later. And they're really easy to set up. I've got a video. I put a video about this on YouTube. If you create an event in Google Calendar, it automatically generates a Google Meet link. So it's a really easy thing to set up and do. Screencastify is opening up their premium stuff, which is great because you can record videos longer than 10 seconds and you can get all the editing tools with it now. So that's a Chrome extension that I've used for a really long time. I love it. If you're wanting to record lessons or record your screen or videos or anything, I would recommend Screencastify. It's easy to use. It saves to Google Drive. It's a good tool. Nearpod, I think, is opening up some of their premium features. If you've never used Nearpod before, it's essentially like a PowerPoint or a Google Slides that you can either do live or student paced, where they can go through and kind of command the slides on their own, or if you're doing it live, you can go through the slides from a remote distance. So Nearpod's cool. We've talked about Kahoot, and Kahoot, like once I got into Kahoot to set up our Disney trivia night, Kahoot has a lot of new features that I haven't really looked at since I was in the classroom. But Kahoot does a lot of things, including they have a slides feature where you can essentially create like a PowerPoint presentation in Kahoot. You can create some open-ended questions in Kahoot. You can create some polls. There's just a lot of new features that Kahoot has to offer.
Have
So
you well,
Go ahead.
you said Nearpod, then Kahoot. Have you played the Time to Climb game that's on Nearpod?
I have not.
Okay, it's basically like Kahoot, but you know how with Kahoot you have to like kind of stand at your device and hit next and do all that jazz. With the Time to Climb on Nearpod, it's like you can hit start and you can circulate the room. And after each question, it kind of like shows like everybody climbing this mountain. I like the Time to Climb on Nearpod better than Kahoot. So if you've never tried that feature, it's really fun for like a game or review game or trivia and things like that. So
Yeah.
I know you just said Kahoot has all these new features and that's awesome too, but I was just letting you know that Nearpod's Time to Climb is very similar to Kahoot, but it's even better in the sense that you can like start it and walk away.
Yeah. No, and that's great too. And another thing that's similar to Nearpod is Pear Deck, like Pear the Fruit. I liked Pear Deck. I used it as an add-on though for Google Slides, but it's another way to do like some interactive activities. You can add questions to slides, or it's a way to get feedback from students remotely. And then I think probably the last one I'll end on for this episode is Edpuzzle, which is essentially a way you can make videos, turn them into lessons. So if you have a YouTube video that you like using, you can embed it with questions, you can embed it with voice notes, you can set it to where if you assign it through Classroom or whatever platform, kids can't skip ahead, and it automatically grades stuff. It automatically links to Google Classroom. Edpuzzle's just a good tool if you're wanting to use videos. One of the things I used to do when I had subs come in the classroom is I would record in Screencastify me instructing the lesson. Like if I was going through a set of slides or whatever, I would go through and it'd be me talking, and I would record the screen. Then I would upload the Screencastify video into an Edpuzzle and embed questions that the students would actually have to stop and answer. And it also keeps track of like how much of the video the students have seen or watched. And it's just a good way if you're using videos to kind of maintain some accountability and things like that. So those are just some premium tools that are being offered for free from some big companies or at a discount. So that's what I've got. You got anything else?
No, I think in our double the length that we planned on episode, we've pretty much covered everything we have to cover today.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing is, I do believe that we'll come out of this better, and I don't want to get too sappy or anything, but I think educators will have a newfound respect from everyone as a result of this, and I think it'll be challenging, but when we get on the other side of it, it'll end up being a positive thing. So with that, let's jump into our exit ticket. So for our exit ticket, the question that we've got for each other is, what is your favorite book to share or to read with kids? And I probably know the answer. Well, I knew the answer before I saw it on here, but for you, because this has been one of your, is this your all-time favorite book? I feel like it is.
All-time favorite book.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Go
actually,
ahead.
I have two answers. Is it okay if I have two answers to this question?
I guess it'll have to be.
Okay, so my favorite book to share with kids, if a kid's like looking for a book to read, one of the books I'll always recommend, it's called Schooled by Gordon Korman. Have you read it? Probably not.
No.
Okay, so it's
I
basically
maybe.
Okay, it's basically this kid. His name's Capricorn, and they call him Cap, and he is raised like on a commune with his grandmother. So he's like never been to school, like doesn't know like what basic things are. And something happens to his grandmother, and so he has to go to school for the first time, and he has like no clue what's going on. Like this kid showing him to his locker, and he's like, "What's a locker?" And the kid's like, "You know, where you lock your stuff up." And he's like, "Why would you lock your stuff up? Like everything's meant to share. You're supposed to share
Yeah.
with people." Like he didn't know what like 911 was. I mean, it's just really funny to see, and he kind of grows into his own. And anyway, it's just a really fun book. It's an easy read. It's a pretty quick read, and so I love to recommend that book to kids because it just catches their attention like really quickly from the very beginning. I did that for First Chapter Friday one time, like I mentioned earlier, and like I had like a wait list to get that book. So I love recommending that book to kids. My favorite book to read with kids, and I don't get to do this anymore because I don't teach 8th grade anymore, but favorite book of all time is The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. I vividly remember being in 8th grade at Heritage Middle School and reading this book and thinking about, and I kind of always knew I wanted to be an English teacher, but I remember thinking like, I want to teach 8th grade one day so I can teach this book. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up teaching 8th grade and teaching that book. It's just one of my favorite books of all time. There's just so much meat in it. It's one of those books that just really kind of captivates kids and gets them, into it, or they're begging to read more. You know this because you taught beside me, but every year I would read it with my kids out loud, like every word of every chapter. And towards the end, I would cry. Every single class, I would cry. Like,
Yep.
and I've read the book multiple times to multiple classes, read it by myself, and like I know what's happening, I know what's coming, but yet I would still cry every single time in every single class.
Yeah. I remember being next door, and kids would come from your room into mine, like crying, like tears down their face, crying. I'm like, are you guys reading The Outsiders again? Because like, yeah, Miss Kelsey, she started crying, and then I started crying, and then Pony
Yes.
Boy, and I'm like, all right, I get it.
And it's always the boys. Like the girls will cry too, but it's always
yeah.
the boys. I remember I'll look up and I'll see boys with like their shirts over their head because like they want everybody to see them crying. Like it's just a powerful, powerful book where
Yeah.
students just latch on to those characters. It's so great. I will say one of my biggest pet peeves is there's a part in the book where Johnny, one of the characters, says "stay gold." Like he talks to Pony Boy
Yeah.
and says "stay gold," and like that's the exact word, "stay gold." But yet there's like all these like T-shirts and like wall prints and all this stuff now that says "stay golden," and
Yeah.
I feel like they're trying to make an Outsiders reference, but they got it wrong. So I'm not
Yeah.
sure like what's going on. But every time I see one of those, I'm like, that's not what it says. Like it's supposed to be "stay
Right.
gold."
That's like one of those most famous misquoted.
Yes, and and again, I don't know if they're trying to quote The Outsiders, but I see it on like tons of stuff. Like I said, like I've seen it at Kirkland's on signs, I've seen it on T-shirts at American Eagle, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not what it's supposed to be. But The Outsiders is my number one go-to, and I will say, as a 6th and 7th grade teacher, I almost never recommend it to kids because I don't want it to be ruined for them when they get to 8th grade. I want them
Yeah.
to experience it for the first time with their class and all of its glory. But definite favorite book of all time. Like it's just, oh gosh, it's just so good. You're probably rolling your eyes, but I just love that book. So definitely my favorite book to read with kids and to suggest to kids. So if you've never read The
Right.
Outsiders, like stop living under a rock and go get it.
Well, those are good ones.
What about you?
I've got, now that you've said that, and since this is an extended episode anyway, I'm gonna go with, I've got 4 answers here.
Oh my gosh.
Because I mean, I've been middle school for so long, and then elementary for this past little while. My favorite book to share, if I'm going a book to share with middle school kids, it is, and I'm gonna make sure I get the title of it right, but I think it's Children of Blood and Bone.
Oh yeah.
And I cannot pronounce the author's name, even though I saw her on Jimmy Fallon a long time ago. But it is a book I would recommend. It's kind of like if, Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi, I'm going to guess Adeyemi. It's a really good young adult novel, and I think there's actually the sequel to the first one is out now. But it's kind of like Harry Potter meets Black Panther meets Game of Thrones, kind of, if anybody gets any of those references. But it's a good book that it hits all of like the young adult, like Hunger Games, things that a teenager would want to read in a book, but it also is about a different culture. And a big thing that I'm trying to promote and get into with like students is reading books about people and characters and stories that are different from yourself. And I think that's a great place to start. It's entertaining. It hits all the marks for young adult novels, but it is, at least for where we live in East Tennessee, it's a good book to pick up to read about people that are different than you. I think the book does a good job of addressing that, people who are different, and it's entertaining. So that's what a book I would share with middle school kids. One that I would share with elementary kids is, I'm going to go back in the 90s and go with Animorphs. Did you ever read Animorphs?
No, I've never even heard of that.
Okay, so long story short on this one, there's a group of kids, an alien space. This is going to sound so stupid describing it, but they were my favorite books growing up. But like an alien spaceship crashes, and there's this thing that these kids touch. It's like a cube or an orb or something, and it allows the kids to like turn into animals. And it's interesting. It's kind of out there. It's sort of like Power Rangers, except instead of turning into like, robots and things like that, they turn into animals and they'd fight like, the bad guys and whatever. So I always thought it was cool. I had my favorite one. He turned into a golden eagle, and I thought that was cool. So that would be the book that I would share with, if like a 3-5 kid walked up to me. I'd say pick up any Animorphs book and go to town. Books that I would read to kids, if it was middle school, I'd book to read. I'd probably stick with, I don't know, Children of Blood and Bone. There's some kind of semi, maybe, I don't know, graphic parts in it. Not super graphic, but people die. But I'd probably stick with something like that, or Hunger Games. I always enjoyed Hunger Games. My favorite book to read, I think, with elementary kids, though, and I'm only saying this really because I started reading this in our time off with my 5-year-old, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer Stone. It's hard to beat, those early Harry Potter books. The chapters are pretty good. They're readable in one sitting, and so we're just trying to do like a chapter a night. And he likes Harry Potter anyway. I don't know why anybody wouldn't like Harry Potter, but any of those Harry Potter books, I would probably chunk those down into chapters and read those with any of our K5 kids.
I think that's so great. That. Yeah. And just on a personal note, reading with Liam, that's like the best thing you can ever do. I remember vividly, like plain as day, like it was yesterday, sitting down every single night and reading with my dad. Well before I went to school, like thanks to that, I was able to go to kindergarten knowing how to read. But I mean, I remember that plain as day, just like every night sitting in my parents' bed and reading with him, and he would like read like big books to me, small books, whatever. And that's just so great. So I love that you're doing that with Liam and sticking to and not just sticking to like a small kids book and branching out and doing something, kind of big for a 5-year-old. So kudos to you, Dad. Good job.
Yeah. Well, we're trying. And plus, we've ran through all of the like kids books.
Yeah.
And Brittany had actually, she's bought like they're not graphic novels necessarily, but they're illustrated versions of the Harry Potter books,
Oh
and that's kind of helped
yeah,
with him
yeah.
because he can. I'll read. Yeah, I mean the words are the same, but there's still like pictures and things for him to look at. Now I'll admit there's some chapters that he's less into than others, but no, it's one we've got the time now to do it, and we're wanting to kind of read to him maybe a little bit above his level just to kind of get him used to some stuff like that. But it's good, it's entertaining. He likes Harry Potter, so there's that. And Bonnie loves books. My daughter, she we read to her, and I mean she's 18-ish months. I don't know if she understands what we're reading or what exactly she's picking up from reading, but she loves books. She loves turning the pages. Today we were at home pretty much all day, and she would run back into her room and drag a book out, and she'd go, book, read, and we'd read a book, and as soon as we get done, she'd take it back and go get another one and bring it out. And so, we try to read, and I'm not really a reader, but I think it's important for me. I want my kids to be readers, and I'll read to them. That's the one thing I'll never say no to is reading to my kids. So there's that.
Well, you know what they say, readers are leaders. So
There
you are
you go.
raising leaders. I love it.
All right, I think that's
Awesome.
it.
That's it. That wraps up today's episode. I think we should tell everybody, like, don't take our advice on, like, we say keep it simple, and we're planning on keeping a 30-minute episode, and yet we have made it like triple that. So,
well, we've also been, self-quarantined, hashtag stay home. We've been, so we're probably
we're
trying
just pumped to talk to people.
Yeah, it's that. And, here's what we'll say with this episode. If you made it this far in, and maybe we'll say this when we promote it, but, this, instead of, pushing out 5 or 6 episodes, a week, which I think we had like originally planned on, we'll just do 1 or 2, like very lengthy episodes. So, here's one very lengthy episode.
Very nice. Awesome. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're still listening at this point, major kudos to you. You're going to get like a big high five and a hug after this quarantine is over. Unless you're not into hugs, we can fist bump. That's cool too.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, we'll let's leave this one on, kind of going back to what we said earlier, this will be challenging. A lot of teachers, parents, students, everyone's kind of going through their own unique challenges with this. But when we get on the other side, we're going to, like Wes Kieschnick said, schools will be better. Teachers will be better. I think we'll all come out of this better versions of what we were.
Totally. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in today. Hopefully you've learned something, and hopefully you're enjoying your quarantine, you're staying home, you're distance learning, and let us know how it's going. I mean, we're going to be home for the next couple of weeks together, so hit us up in our Facebook group, Top 10 Teaching, TENN, Top 10 Teaching. Send us a picture of your workspace if you want to. Do you have a workspace, Derrick?
It's anywhere in the house that like right now it's in my nightstand next to my bed.
Yeah, I'm on my bed
pretty
too.
much anywhere in my house. Yeah.
Yeah. So send us a picture of your workspace. Send us a picture if your kids are at home with you, what you're having them do. Let us know how you're communicating with your kids and with your families and kind of what you're doing. We can all learn from each other. And I kind of look forward to seeing what everybody else is doing. So cool. Let us know.
All right. And thanks for listening. And reach out to us if you got any ideas. We'll put all of our resources that we can in our show notes, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
All right. See you later.